Welcome back. This is session 4 of Reducing Burnout and Restoring Empathy. And as we've noted on a couple of previous sessions, we have a guest with us today. And I am so pleased finally to introduce Sandy Watson, who has had 47 years of experience in the field and understands burnout and returning to the field and not leaving it, which is quite an accomplishment when you think of 47 years.
Long time.
Yeah, and I know we both like to talk, but they've heard me for the last 3 sessions, so I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about your burnout and what you do
Sure.
and how you did it.
Sure. So, I started this journey when I was 18, entering college at St. Lawrence in Kingston. I wish I had a romantic story to tell of how I got into this field, but I don't.
No.
I went to the guidance office, and I was actually looking for languages to get into, and they said, well, no, you need another language other than French or English. And I said, well, if I go home and I haven't applied, my mother will kill me. So I said, what's available? And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to work with people. And they said, what kind of people? I said, kids, but not little kids. I want to work with troubled youth. And they said, okay, how about the child care worker program? I said, is it out of Belleville? And they said, it's not offered in Belleville. It wasn't at Loyalist at that time. And I said, okay, sign me up, because I also wanted to spread my wings and didn't go too far afield. I just went to Kingston, so I wasn't too far away. And it was a 3-year program. So interestingly, partway through the program, they were talking about burnout in the field. And they
What did they call it that time?
Burnout.
Was it burnout?
Yeah,
Okay,
it was
that's
burnout,
good,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, no compassion fatigue or anything like that. It was just straight up burnout. Mind you, in those days, we also, when we were restraining a kid, you grabbed whatever limb was flailing and put them down. There was no PMAB, there was no training. It was just do it.
Yeah.
So they talked about burnout, and they said that the average burnout rate in this field was 2 years. And I thought, well, that's kind of stupid. We're going to school for 3 years to burn out in 2? That made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to start paying attention to this, and it's just going to be something that I'm aware of. And I realized probably my first job in the field, the actual paid job, was with young offenders. They were juvenile delinquents back in those days, 8 to 16-year-olds who could be charged. And they could be charged with being incorrigible, which most adults would be charged with today. But, what does that even mean? It means you're not listening properly and not doing what you're told. And that was a criminal offense for kids. We've come a long way from then. But so that was my first job. And that was a heavy job. Like it was, like I said, there was no plexiglass. The windows were real glass. So when they broke them and threw it at you, it was shards being thrown.
And did you have 18-year-olds or 8-year-olds?
No, we because it was custody, we were 12. We were when as young as 12.
That's still hard to see a
And they could
12-year-old,
smoke,
right?
At 12 years old,
Yep.
they could smoke, which, I understand from a health perspective why that's not allowed anymore. But
This is going out to the health unit. We
Yeah.
just are aware now that 12-year-olds shouldn't smoke.
But from a behavior modification point of view, cigarettes were a great incentive. So it took away. It started. We had to rely on our skills more than giving
I
out-
am going to get some emails on this. I can just see it now.
Well, this
No,
is
it's awesome.
1980,
Yeah,
so
this is
early,
awesome.
1980, 79, 80. So there was a lot of things we just didn't know or understand back then. So, in that kind of job, I realized that in order to be effective, you almost need to let yourself burn out every day. Like, to recognize how difficult the day was and honor that and say, this was a really tough day at work. And
Some of that mindfulness, right?
Yes,
This is,
I am
don't
beat.
try to beat
Absolutely.
it down. Lean into it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's what I did for a number of years. I just, I burned out every day. And when it was the point that, if I couldn't go to work and give at least 75% of myself, I took a mental health day because I knew that, the clients didn't care not they didn't care. They weren't aware that I wasn't probably giving them as much as I should, and that's not fair because that's why we're at our jobs, right? It's to serve our clients. So it was something that I became mindful of as well, was to use my sick time for those kind of days. I've been very lucky that throughout my field, my career, I've been able to use sick time for things like that. So that was really, really helpful. But I also am someone, I always gave 150% of myself. So, I was never one to turn down a shift or refuse to work with a difficult kid or anything like that. I just,
And that can lead to burnout in
it
itself,
absolutely
right?
can.
That type A personality, I'm going to
Yeah.
fix it, and
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. So, you have to be, but I also tried to balance it. I remember one year, nobody ever wants to work over Christmas. And I kind of giggle to myself when people say, the old days were so great when, things were closed on a Sunday. And I've never had a job where things were closed on a Sunday.
Yeah.
They've always been open because I've spent most of my career working in some sort of residence. So,
Yeah.
it was. So anyway, I said, well, you know what, I'll work Christmas, and we managed to get most of the kids home on passes, but one child was just too dangerous to put out in the community. So he had to stay in custody. So we had the parents come down and have dinner with us at the home, so that the child could at least spend Christmas with their family. But I worked 56 hours straight. Went in at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and I worked right through till 8 o'clock on the 27th. But what I got out of that was a week off with pay and a double paycheck. So I was mindful of that when it was happening, that the reward would be good. So I've always looked sort of to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Have you ever left a job because of burnout? Because we know sometimes one of the things that happen when people have disengaged and they're burnt out, literature and research that sometimes changing positions is actually the cure for the burnout.
Yeah, I mean, my current position, I certainly, the last year and a half, I've been off on a leave, and that, didn't leave the job because of it. I took time off because of it, because of burnout and just, I hit a mental wall, and I think you can only do so much, and you realize that, I've done my time and I've done my piece, and but what's interesting is in the half that I've been off, certainly within the last year, clients ruminate things that I clearly didn't process at the time it was happening. When you work in the violence against women sector, you hear and see some pretty horrific things, and it's constant. It's not the odd one will be difficult. Every story is difficult to hear, whether it's psychological, emotional, sexual, physical, whatever, or a combination of all the above. You have people who are bearing their soul, and you experience that in the mental health field as well. So, by not processing it, it really kind of lived in my head, but I didn't realize it was living in my head. I thought I worked through these things really well. So that's something that all of a sudden this client will pop into my head, and I think, I haven't thought of that person in 20 years, and there it is, right front and center. So
That is I think you've just illustrated beautifully what we talk about with some of our folks that have been doing the frontline heavy lifting with the overdoses. We know that for those that do pass away, our frontline staff are they carry their dead. And all the staff do,
Absolutely.
right back to the OW worker that's sitting there at the desk that filed their thing. And when they ruminate and come through that, and what could I have done different? And to hear that it is a natural evolution of all of us who are exposed to trauma, whatever form. Horrific stories from domestic violence. We know sexual assault sector deals with that. We know right now dealing with homelessness and addictions that we're seeing just the worst part of humanity and trying to work with it to make a difference. So I think that's so important. So just reflect back on some of the sessions, and what Sandy has identified is spot on, is that you ruminate and think about those clients. And we talk about in grief, we carry the dead, or we carry those clients that carry their dead, and what happens in the overdoses. But at the violent stories, and we know, especially in the domestic violence sector, we still have partner who kills a partner.
Absolutely.
And so all of that comes together, and you carry this kind of big load of shit of emotional sadness, of heaviness, and working your way through it. So you've kind of got grace to have a period to ruminate and reflect without interruption. How is that different from when you were on the job?
Well, I think there's two things there. One is that it's shocked me, actually, the amount of times people have popped into my head. As I said, I thought that I dealt with that 20 years ago. We move on because we have to, in anything that happens in our lives, we move on. But the other part is, by being too busy to deal with it, you pack it in there and it's going to come out. It's like anything else. It'll come out your pores. If you
Yeah.
don't deal with something, it's coming out of you.
Or your eyes.
Or
Yeah.
it'll come out through behaviors. It'll come out through potential addictions. It'll come out through mental health. It's coming out of you at some point. And if we don't deal with it at the time that it happened, or soon after, we don't know when it's coming out of us. Why? Because it's just there.
Right. It sits.
And when somebody says, what happened? How did that person have a psychotic break? Well, have we looked into potentially what happened, and did they bury things that they didn't deal with? So it's really the advantage of dealing with it at the time, I think, prevents it from leaking out later on.
Yeah.
Or if it does leak out later on, it's not as traumatic, because it's you processed it properly at the time. So I think that the value, certainly in a workplace, of debriefing, supporting each other, recognizing that person may need to take an afternoon and take a deep breath. Don't throw them back in to a client. We think as workers, well, I'll just move on. I'll go to the next client, and then but that's what buries stuff. That's what stacks it.
And don't be brave. That's the other thing.
Absolutely.
As working with people, and I know they've had a tough morning, and I'll say, do the check-in. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about me. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's just the phrase that just sticks, and go, now I am worried about you. If you say, oh, I think I need an hour, I need to go home, or I'm done, it's like, good, go, right? We'll
Yeah.
get somebody to cover. But when I hear, and I know it's been horrific, and somebody goes, I'm fine. It's like, okay.
How?
Yeah.
How can you be?
Not if you're doing this business
Yeah.
and you're doing this work. It's going to come out. It's going to leak out somewhere.
It
Or you're
is.
going to go home and yell at the cat, or you're going to
Yep.
tell your partner he's an idiot,
Yeah.
and they're going to look at you like, what the hell? And it's
Yeah.
like, it has nothing to do with the partner or the cat. It has to do with, I've done this, or something's happened today at work, and I've just brought it home.
Or you're going to go home and go to bed, and depression is going to start creeping in.
Got to be careful.
You have to be very, very careful. So I think that, certainly the early days, and, when I graduated in 1980, the field it was relatively new. So there was just a lot of things that we didn't know, but it's almost seen as weak not to be able to handle the work. And now I think we're moving into the right direction.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, because I know a lot of people that
The cult of busyness, right? A glorifying busyness.
Yeah, a lot of people that I went to school with. I'm still friends with people that I, roommates from college and that. Some of them gave up this work a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was too much, and there was too much expected of them. And to add to that, we're not paid all that well, and for a lot of people, there's no benefits. Some places don't have benefits, so you don't even have that opportunity to go speak to somebody else about what's going on, and you end up relying on your coworkers. And I remember one case in particular when I started working at the shelter. The first time I was there twice, 93 to 02, and then 2014 till now. We had a client who came in, and she couldn't speak. She couldn't speak, and she was mumbling, and I was trying so hard to understand what she was saying. And I went into the staff, and I said, "Excuse me, I can't understand what that woman is saying to me." And they said, "Oh, he beat her so badly in the face that she bit her tongue, and it swelled to fill the inside of her mouth." And I remember thinking, "Oh my God! Like, how do you go from one day saying I love you to the next day beating someone so badly that they can't speak?" I actually went to McDonald's and got the big yellow straws so that she could weave it to the back of her tongue and get some nourishment, because she couldn't even take in food or drink. So anyway, I drove home, and I pulled over and I wept, because it was such a horrifying thing to witness. And I drove, I mean, to be honest, these are way before cell phone days, so I think there was one in the agency, and it was a brick, and
Yeah,
it
I
was,
remember
it
the
was
big
for
old
on-
bag phone.
it was for
Yeah.
a weapon, it was
Yeah.
for on call. So I drove home, and I called back to the shelter, and I said, I'm having a really hard time processing this client, and that was expected, that was certainly encouraged.
Yeah.
Call back,
Yeah.
because it's just as difficult for the workers as it is for anyone else. So that was something that was really encouraged, and so I called back, and I said, I'm having a really difficult time processing this one client, and I said, when do you get used to it? And they said, the staff on the phone said, well, I don't know, I'm not used to it yet. And I hung up the phone, and I thought, I don't think I ever want to get used to this.
No.
I don't want to ever think this is normal, or it's okay, or it's acceptable. I always want to be crushed every time I hear somebody tell a story that's so horrific that they can't get nourishment.
But crushed to be able to get up.
Yes.
Right? That's the important part. If you're crushed and you're immobilized by it, if you're weighted down, that's kind of the time to see support, to see help. I had a moment like that. It's funny, and it's in the car, right? I think in the car is that processing
Yes,
time. You're
yeah.
driving, you're kind of on autopilot.
Yeah.
For our wonderful police force that might be listening to this, and we're never on autopilot when we drive, especially where there's new radars and cameras going in.
Well, I actually pulled over because I'm a good driver.
But I was working for the CDC, and there had been I was also doing some secondary jobs with CAS and contract work, and there had been a pretty brutal case, and I'm on my way to the CDC, a job that I love. It was in Madoc. I was at satellite office, and that song, the shoe song, the Christmas shoe
Oh,
song,
yes.
came on, and I started blatting, driving. I had to pull over. I'm listening to this song. I'm bawling, and to this day I hate that song. It
yeah.
comes on in the radio or in a mall somewhere, I just growl at it. But it was like, hold on, this is something more than a song. What are you thinking of? What are you carrying? And I realized crying is my release. Like if I can cry, and sometimes I call it leaking. If there's been days that I've leaked at work, they'll come in the office and they'll look and go, oh, it's been a tough one. We didn't get funding, or
Yeah.
you have to make moves of laying off people. It always hurts your
Oh, it
heart,
does.
right? But so I realized that the tears aren't the weakness. It's leaking, and it's kind of letting all the air, or letting some of the air out of the balloon, so I don't pop.
Yeah.
So I that's maybe a bad analogy, but
It's a
but that
good one.
weeping and that feeling, like I hope I'm always impacted, and I feel, because the minute I don't feel,
Yeah.
when I get too analytical or too cynical,
Yeah.
like time to get my ass out the
Yeah,
door.
yeah. When I was, doing stats and things as an ED and reporting on them, one of the things that I was always mindful of, I know from a reporting point of view, they're numbers, but there's a person behind every single one of those numbers, and that person has a story to tell.
Absolutely.
And, we kind of lose sight sometimes of the fact that they need us to be there. We don't, need them. They need us. And that's why we have jobs, is to serve and to, provide services to the clients who are in need, whether it's, people suffering from addictions, mental health, violence against women, sexual assault, poverty, whatever that need is. I think sometimes workers lose sight of the fact that the clients, we have jobs because those clients need us to have jobs, and that's the bottom line. Governments don't throw copious amounts of money at agencies just because it's a bunch of nice people that work there. It's because you're needed. And
do
when
the
you
work.
cease to be needed, then
Yeah.
you're out of work. So it's just unfortunate that our governments don't, and I know it would be double the cost, but we need a government that works in a reactionary and a proactive basis, because different needs come up all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, 40 years ago, we would not be talking about an opioid crisis.
No.
So
10 years ago, we
10
wouldn't
years
have it,
ago,
right?
So it's different things happen at different times, and
Absolutely.
so we react when it becomes a problem. But if we paid attention, not specifically just opioids, but if we had people who are on panels to, I don't know about direct advise, perhaps, the decision makers on what needs to happen, or what what we're looking at coming up, coming up for issues for people. Because the front line know first
They do.
what's going on.
And that piece comes back to when is burnout and when is the importance of keeping people doing the work of funding matters and not just piecemeal. When are we going to look at a systems approach to burnout and compassion fatigue and the trauma, the complex PTSD that can happen from people doing
Yep.
this work and not getting the right supports at the right time, or trying to do 50 hours, I won't give you shit, but doing
Yeah.
that kind of stuff
Yeah.
and not having the respite. And we don't recognize that as part of the workload balance.
Absolutely.
We talk about it, and everyone can say, yes, I'm mindful about, but what are you really truly doing?
Yep.
And I think one of the things is being able to talk about it
Yep.
and not see it as a weakness. And I think you pointed that out. It is not a weakness to say, today I'm not strong enough
That's
to do
right.
this.
No, that's actually a superpower.
Yeah.
Because you're not providing your coworkers the support they need, and you're not providing the clients the support they deserve if you are not able to do the work on that day. So it's, and when that client comes to your office or your whatever space you're meeting in, you're their expert, you're their comfort, you're their security blanket. You're the person that they trust to pour their heart out to. They expect that you're going to be there for them. They don't know what's going on in our own lives, and nor should they. But if you're not able to give the client the service they deserve, then you've done a disservice to that client, and that's not fair. Then we need to reevaluate why we're in the work.
Absolutely, right? There are times when when a client is left and you think that wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
And you make a note in a case file. And I always make a note if it's been a bad day or because sometimes you go to work and you're fine and something shifts mid-afternoon and then you have someone in and you're a little bit distracted. And I always make a note because it comes back to it when they're sitting there and saying, you know what, I apologize. You have my full attention. Something was happening.
Yes.
Yes. Because there's humanity in saying I'm not 100% all the time either with the client that's sitting there that's struggling.
Absolutely.
Because if
you're emulating, you're showing them it's okay.
Yeah, we can all have
We're
bad
not
days.
perfect. Yeah.
And we can have bad days that we can acknowledge because that helps us to have a better day.
Absolutely.
We need T-shirts, girl.
Absolutely.
We should just
Yeah,
open
yeah.
up T-shirts,
That's
sayings.
it.
Yeah, we're good.
With all the different, and doormats, so as people can see it as they walk in the door.
If I'm going to
Take
have a
deep breath.
doormat, darling, it's going to be something really nasty because I'm wiping my feet. That'll make me feel good.
Double-sided,
You
depending on
bet.
your mood that
Yeah.
day. I remember a client I was working with, and I was doing an application for her, and she'd had serious years and years of sexual abuse, and after an hour and a half, it was really weighing on me, and I thought, I can't listen to one more second of this disclosure. And I said to her, I think this is a natural place to stop and perhaps come back to this next week. We'll do another appointment, because that was a long time to hear just disclosure and not be counseling them or providing the options.
you're
It was
just
just
hearing-
taking it in.
They're just spilling.
You're
Yeah.
writing, typing it out as you go.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so she, finished the session, and I thought about it afterwards, and I thought that wasn't fair. Like, we'd booked 3 hours to do that, and I cut her off. And so I said to her the next session, I owe you an apology. I said, I cut that off because I found it was too difficult for me to hear anymore. You lived it.
Yeah.
And I should have been there to listen to you. And she said, no, I actually went home and thought, I was really pleased because that meant you heard me. Yeah. That meant you were listening to me. And I was like, oh, okay, then you're right. I was listening, and it did flood me. But I thought I'd done her a disservice, but it turned out I'd actually done her a service.
I think the biggest thing in working with the frontline piece is about that honesty.
Yeah.
And I think it, whether it's down at Bridge Street working with the folks that are coming in there, I really admire the staff down there because they have that vulnerability and they're really open and honest. Or whether it's the work we're doing at here, or whether it's at Three Oaks, or whether it's at the health unit, they're doing amazing stuff.
Yep.
We forget that there's a collateral. There's a collective
Yeah.
grief and sadness
Yes.
that kind of overarches everything.
Yes.
But if we're honest about it, if we can say together that it's a hard day, or that when we lose someone from the streets to opiates again, and we know that there's poisonous drugs out there, that you can state that and you can grieve collectively and feel that, yeah, we let that person down because something didn't go right. And I mean, this is why we keep, I'll just assure you, these conversations are staying along the front line, because saying that in some certain circles that there's a vulnerability and that we let down someone who took their life, there'd be a very interesting pushback. But I think we do take it as a collective that we let someone down. Not that we did,
Yeah.
but when we lose someone to that, and,
Yeah.
and in any sector, there is a feeling that we could have done more. And I think that's the part that leads to burnout, because you can't always be thinking I could have done more when really everything that could be done at that moment has been done, because we start to reflect and we look back and we pick out moments of time where we think this would make a difference, but we forget that things are unfolding minute by minute by minute,
Absolutely.
and it's just a continuum of this minute to this section to
Yeah.
this hour, and so you don't see those magic moments that you feel you let someone down because they're just part of a process.
Absolutely.
But when you pluck them out, that just hurts your heart.
Yeah, it does.
So you have to be careful about that rumination. And
Yeah.
I'm taking a long time to say, how do you tell yourself you did the best you could and believe it? Because that's a big
It
deal.
is. It is. And I always, I've always said, and I still believe that when I go to bed at night, if I can close my eyes and say, I did the best that I could do, then I've had a good day. And best what I could do with what the information I had at that moment.
Bingo.
You know, because the other part too is that even though clients will often disclose things that, on a daily basis, you or I might not disclose because it's pretty heavy and pretty personal, they still could be holding back on a significant
do.
piece. They do.
Yeah.
Because that's just that one piece that,
I'll trust you with this much and
Yeah.
see what you do. And then I'll trust
Absolutely.
you with this much.
but the piece that they've held back might have been the key piece that you didn't even know needed to be
and then
looked
you
at.
shift, right? Because
Yeah.
you have to, well, now I have all the
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
We're going to be approaching this a little differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we get stuck in our own silos of partly because it's expected of us with our funders, but also it's because what we know.
Right. It's comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's where we're at. It's the information that we have. And I remember when I was teaching at the college, I remember doing an interview and counseling with a group, and their scenario was that a man had come out of prison. He'd been doing B&Es, and his probation or parole officer said he had to find a job. So he needed to go to this job search place and look for work. So he came in and he sat down, and what I had said to the person who was playing the person getting out of jail, throw some little tidbits out there, like, I have no money. I have nowhere to sleep tonight. I have no food. I'm hungry. And, see what happens. So when they were doing it, I said, there were some really neat moments in that where you really probably should have put the job search to the side, because if you look at his history of break and enters, it's because he had no money and he had no food and he had nowhere to go. So he needed a quick way to make some cash. So, if I were that worker, what I would have probably said to him was, you know what? I don't think I'm the service you need right now. Let me call my friend over at, Ontario Works or wherever we can get some emergency funding, or, if it's the homelessness issue or whatever. See what we can put in place for you. Let you get settled for a week and come on back next week, and then we'll work on the resumes and things. And then I would call someone and make that referral over and do a soft transfer and get that person in. Because if I just stick on resume writing and I don't hear what that person has told me, he's going out and doing more B&Es tonight, and he's getting arrested and put back in. But he's going to have a nice resume, when he gets there. So and I don't mean to pick on job search people. It could be anybody. It could be, someone could come to the shelter and they have such serious mental health problems that they really need a service, either working with us or beyond us.
So if you're in the piece of burnout, does that narrow your scope so that you're sticking to I am an employment counselor. I'm sticking to the employment because I just want to do my job today. And there's so many things and I really hate it.
Yeah.
But I'm not picking up the cues because I'm just so focused because it's all I can do to be here.
I'm
So,
scripted.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'm working on autopilot. So that is something we definitely see on burnout, right?
Absolutely.
You don't look at the bigger picture because you don't have the capacity.
That's right. And you don't have either the personal capacity or the knowledge.
Right.
And I think that we have to rely on each other more in the field. And unfortunately, funding is such a difficult thing for all of us. So,
No, is it really?
Yeah, I know. It's
No.
the bane of my existence is seeking funding. I know how to do the job. I just need to find the money to do the job. So, that's just such a difficult thing. And the other part that they don't recognize too, burnout in management, is you use different parts of your brain to actually do the work. It's not, like you use like left brain for some things and right brain. There has to be an ability to transition over. Like when you're in a proposal writing phase.
I call it surfacing.
Absolutely.
Somebody will come to my door and they'll ask me a question and I'll look up at them and it's like, I didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
And it's just gone. Alex is nodding. Yep, you do that a lot.
Yeah.
But you get so focused and
it's a different part of your brain.
And somebody comes and I said, I have to come to the surface and really hear what you're saying because I'm thinking how I can make this box work for what we do so we can get this funding to keep this position.
Or what creative language can I use that nobody else has used yet that'll
and-
make me stand out,
Or let's be innovative on
Yeah.
something on a service we desperately need, but try and create it innovative so we can
Yeah.
at least keep it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think we miss that with managers, that we don't acknowledge that it's not that we're incapable of doing that, but it really does take an entirely different part of your brain to work with numbers and things as opposed to doing frontline work. And a lot of us do get mixed up in both. Partly that's partly my own fault for doing that, but I truly believe that I can't advocate for money and services if I don't know who I'm advocating for.
Absolutely.
You know-
Frontline is, I carry a caseload
Yeah.
and I know what's going on at the frontline level.
Yeah.
And I know the service pressures.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing coming through the door, right?
Yeah.
And how that shifts and changes. My work used to be suicide bereavement. Now it's sudden death to opiate loss. I would not have predicted that.
Yeah.
But you're right. It keeps you aware of, but it also, I think, causes a bit of, you sit at the tables, and I find through the burnout is I'm sitting at tables where people don't understand that frontline lens, and sometimes you feel that you're dismissed, right? Because you're still doing the frontline speak, or you try to speak from a frontline perspective, and people like,
Yeah,
what are you doing here?
yeah.
And it's not a disrespect. It's like
It's lack of knowledge.
yeah, right. They're looking at you like, well, you're kind of a weird beast.
Well, if you come up through the front line into management, your core is front line. Even though you're doing management duties and ED duties, if you come to this, say, with a business lens, and you've never
a different
actually
thing,
sat
yeah.
down with a woman or a man and had them disclose, you have an entirely different piece with it.
And it's not either one is
No,
wrong.
no,
it's
it's
just
different.
understanding. But that's where some of the burnout is because I know I sit because I talk and I talk very passionately and I've gotten to the point that I figure I can. But I can feel the eyes rolling, right? And you're going, okay, Sandy, do that little voice where you sit and listen now and behave. And then sometimes it just kind of rolls out of you because the passion of the work kind of supersedes the political stuff. And that's what I ruminate going home.
Oh,
It's like,
yes.
oh, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh,
That's where my burnout
hear
comes
you.
from is I shouldn't have said that. I should have kept my
I
mouth
looked like a
shut.
fool.
Yep,
Yeah.
there's the political piece and
Yeah.
you know the players, but
Yeah.
but then lately it's like, so sad.
Yeah.
Right?
And
I don't
I'm doing
care.
this for my clients. I'm not doing this for anybody else in the room. I come here as an advocate.
And that's what brings us back to the frontline
Yeah.
piece and the frontline workers is that advocacy and that if you're passionate about what you do and you want to stay in the field, you pay attention to your body, to your mind, and you learn to reflect and to take that pause.
And I know,
47 years.
yeah, it's a long time, but I also developed we had a client my first round at Three Oaks, and we were out on the highway. She was 78 years old, been with the same guy since she was 16, and he beat the crap out of her on a regular basis. Well, she decided to leave. Her kids were furious that she left poor dad alone in the house. And I said to her, without sounding judgmental, because I certainly wouldn't want to do that, can I ask what was different about this time than any other time? And she said to me, I'll tell you what was different. She said, I put up with this bullshit for 60 years, and I'm not putting up with it a second longer. And I thought, that's the key. It's your bullshit barometer.
Yep.
Where
Boom.
you are at, and whether it's sitting at a table of service providers, or, sitting in a staff meeting, or being invited to a meeting where the ministry's at, or, you have a bullshit barometer. And when you reach that, mine's at 0 right now. Like there's just zero tolerance at this point in my life. And as sad as I am that my, 47 years that I'm 65. Like that's the majority of my life has been, I don't know anything else. Once I worked at friend worked at a credit union in Ottawa, and they were transferring accounts over, and I said to her, how do you do this every day? And she said, what do you mean? She said, how do you do what you do every day? I said, what I do every day is a lot more fun than this. Like, it was just the most, honestly, I did that for about 3 months. And the most exciting thing that I did, they had a mass mailing machine where you'd stack up these envelopes through the postage reader.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow. That was the most exciting thing I did for 3 months was watch. And I would save them up so I'd have a really big pile to put through the machine. Yeah. I couldn't do that on a daily basis. That drove me more mad than the work that I do, and I realized, so it does take different people and special people to do the work. And, and she loved being admin and loved doing it, and more power to her, not me.
And I think that's it. It is about being able to do that. There's something in the day you love and you enjoy. When you're apathetic, when you're like, I really don't care, or I'm looking for a different challenge, and it's not in the scope of what you're doing because you're just done. I call it the 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and the phone rings and you see the name. Are you picking it up? Are you letting it go to voicemail to deal with Monday? And that's when you got that's that check-in. Like, where are you, and how are you working for your client?
Absolutely. So. And what am I willing to do? To keep that going. I think too that another point to be made is that we need to honor each other and recognize that we all have limits. And when somebody reaches that limit, it really should be celebrated that they've recognized that and moved on, not looked down upon. That we need to do that for people.
If you want to change, let's do it.
Yep.
And you support, I've been in the position, as you know, where I've lost good people to better paying jobs, and you can only wish them well because they've been part of your history to getting here, and let them go and say Godspeed. We could go on and on and on. I just thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
And I think there'll be some tidbits that people will be able to take away.
I hope so.
I could just listen to you forever and ever, and probably we could make this a 3-hour podcast, but attention spans are pretty, after pandemic, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So Sandy, again, on behalf of this little thing that we're trying to do, thank you for coming in and sharing 47 years of incredible work and longevity and experience.
And I'm only 40, so
I'm just thinking, in the womb, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I was sitting here just in closing, I was thinking, wow, sitting here together, we have almost 70 years of experience, and that's pretty cool.
And we've known each other, I
long
think
time.
It's like 30 years. So.
Well, that's the first time I met you. You were speaking at
Center Hastings.
Loyalist.
Oh.
And I was in my first year. And you came in and said something that was so impactful because I had left a relationship where faith was so there was very strong Christian faith in the marriage that I left, and very controlling with that faith. But you had said something that just startled me, and it's still impactful, and I use it now. Where I say that if you looked into the heart of a woman who had been emotionally abused, you would see that it was broken. And it was kind of the light that came on, because I had gotten for so many years, "You're not a stupid woman, Sandy," not and not to over disclose, but just, and it resonated, and that made that connection. I came up and talked to you, and I remember I could hardly talk because it was such a realization that, oh, right,
Yeah.
this wasn't just because I was a bad wife,
Yeah.
according to the prayer circle. It was something else going on, right? So it was very interesting. And then our paths just kept crossing.
Yeah.
And just someone I admire and respect so much.
Oh, thank you. And you as well. Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank
and
you.
say hello to that amazing collection of family that
I
you
will,
have.
I
Miss
will.
Caitlin and Miss Addison, who's
I will.
driving.
Driving lesson tonight. So
Whoa.
Yep.
That isn't stress and burnout.
yeah,
I don't know
it's
what
the mall
is.
parking lot. I don't do the roads yet. Can't do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.